Whenever people think of media about the human body and biology, they usually think of a certain series, and for today's video, we're going to be talking about
1, 2, 3, 4. Wait, our cells at work.
Just kidding, we're not going to be talking about that. Instead, we're going to be talking about Osmosis Jones, a film that was released in 2001 and had a TV show spin-off, but sadly, this film was a box office bomb. Having a budget of $70 million and a cast of famous actors like Bill Murray, Chris Rock, and Lawrence Fishburne, and famous singers like Ari Kelly and Bradley Norwood, only for it to make $14 million. And you're all looking at this title probably wondering, how the heck did a film starring Bill Murray and the man who voiced everyone's favorite zebra get a whole freaking iceberg? And the answer to that, I honestly don't know. This iceberg was a team effort like the last one. And just like the last iceberg video, this is just going to be me talking, so I also recommend you do some things like drawing, cleaning, etc. If you don't know what an iceberg is, for some reason, an iceberg chart shows a bunch of facts and topics. The more deeper you go, the more obscure and strange it gets. With that all the way, let's get started on Osmosis Jones and Samurai Jack have the same birthday. Osmosis Jones came out on August 10th, 2001, and at the same time our favorite Samurai Jack came out on August 10th, 2001, making those two series having the same birthday, just like how Earthworm Jim and Freakazoid came out the same day. Ozzy and Drix lost Japanese dub. Ozzy and Drix was a TV show spin-off that was made when the movie came out, and there actually is a Japanese dub of the show, but the thing about it, it's lost, and the only thing that has been found is a promo. Ozzy and Drix Dojin. Believe it or not, they actually had a manga. Well, not really the one that you may think of, but it was in certain magazines and it was based off of the show. This is lost media and only one page has been found. Osmosis Jones and a Mysterious Rash Outbreak. This was a flash game that was made to promote the movie. Anyways, and it's basically about a mysterious rash outbreak, and it's a click and point adventure game that takes place before, during, after the movie's story, and has several areas and things that were not present in the film, like some small things like cursing and a few other areas that we'll talk about later in the iceberg. Osmosis Jones PG-13 cut. When the film was finished in 2000, Warner Bros. Showed it to the rating boards and they gave it a PG-13 rating due to a lot of boily humors and crude language in the film. Warner Bros. Was unpleased, so they ended up cutting and altering a lot of scenes in order to make it more family-oriented. The original PG-13 version hasn't been found or released, and the flash game I mentioned earlier has some remains of it, like cursing. And just saying, the film came out almost 22 years ago, and we haven't had them release the full PG-13 version, but they had released the other version of the Iron Giant. Ozzy and Drax. Alright, I might have hinted this in the past in the Earthworm Jim iceberg. Just like Earthworm Jim ships, there's several ships for this film, mainly bizarre ones. One of those is Ozzy and Drax, and this one is kinda in the same levels as Wormmilk. That's the Earthworm Jim and Evil Jim ship, but it's even more toxic and the fan art is far more worse than Wormmilk. So much so that several Osmosis Jones fan servers or groups actually ban or kick people. Let's just say if you ship the ship, keep it to yourself. If you don't, grab your suitcase and leave. Drax is a bioweapon theory. This theory almost and somewhat dates back to when the film was released. In a nutshell, this theory is about how Drax is possibly a bioweapon due to him being unknown and no medical book or doctor knows what he is, and somewhat been across the country killing multiple victims and being very deadly, as we can see in the film. Also, the name Drax kind of sounds similar to Anti-Drax, but they're both different things compared to side effects, but this theory is kind of an interesting one to examine. Ozzy and Drix storyboards. There's a couple storyboards that show that do exist and are out there on the internet, and on sites like eBay, these go for a high price. Gornard's Gym. This was an area cut from the film. Gornard's Gym would have been an area located in Frank's testicles. They would go there to find an exercising sperm cell. This was cut from the film to tone it to a PG rating, and this scene is lost, and the only evidence of it is various reviews mentioning it, Drix carrying a bag in one scene of the film, and in Osmosis Jones and Mysterious Rash Outbreak, a sperm cell can be seen outside of the zit. Shape-shifting permit. In Osmosis Jones and the Mysterious Rash Outbreak, when the player gets the shape-shifting permit, if you read the text on it, it has a bunch of crude lyrics of a song, which is kinda confusing for a permit, to be honest. Cypro. Cypro was what I guess you could call a prototyped version of Drix, and he was meant to be the color pink and have legs. Or a bandolier and kinda had a few other different things than Drix, and also looked more like a bulky pill than a futuristic looking pill. Weekon. Just like Cypro, this was another prototype character, this time for Drix. Weekon would have wore a white suit and looked like a martial artist villain. He was far more brutal and violent than Drix, but they would have somewhat have the same goal in mind, and at least they say the iconic "Careful, I'm contagious" line. Twin tonsils. In the 1998 script, there was a thing known as the Twin Tonsils, which basically was the Twin Towers. Osmosis Jones' original script. This film actually started pre-production around 1998 and 1999, and the original script was made on June 4th, 1998. The original version of the script would have been a lot more dark and edgy than the final film. The whole plot being kinda different but similar to the final film, certain characters not existing or sort of existing and having different personalities. The city of Frank would have had more of a dark and gritty look to it. And there's also a bunch about this script that I could talk about. I will leave a link of the script in the description. Farnelly Brothers. Peter and Robert Farnelly, or known as the Farnelly Brothers, are both directors and screenwriters for movies. They were the ones who did Osmosis Jones, but sadly they stopped working together. It's okay, I'm her niece. This was a blooper line they said in the film where they end up saying, "It's okay, I'm her niece," and you can already guess why this line is a blooper and is funny.
Shake! What are you doing here? It's okay, I'm her niece!
Bradney, I mean Leah. This is a joke line in a movie referencing Bradley Norwood, who is a famous singer and songwriter and did the voice for Leah, and also appeared in the Making of Osmosis Jones videos. More on that later. Super Freak. Super Freak, aka the song that was turned into You Can't Touch This, only for it to be remixed by Nicki Minaj, was a song made by Rick James. Anyways, I'm getting off topic. This was meant to be played in Osmosis Jones in the scene where they go to the Zit, aka the nightclub, aka the pimple on the forehead, aka the what is it, aka the what is it.
What do you want?
But instead it was replaced with a god-awful Cool Daddy Cool song. But some fans did make edits of this clip with the song Super Freak being played instead. Summer in the City lyrics. This was a song that was played at the end of the film before the credits rolled in. Other than its lyrics, there's actually a music video for the song that uses clips from the film. Cool Daddy Cool lyrics. This is a song that was played in the movie during the scene where they go to the Zit. The instrumental sounds not that bad, it's just the lyrics for a kid's movies is just bad. These lyrics are very inappropriate. There's a few examples like, quote, "I can't be your friend though unless you got some endo to smoke." And the most offending one is, quote, young ladies, I like 'em underage, see. Some say it's statutory, but I say it's mandatory." And these lyrics just make it sound really bad for a kid's film. But yet again, like we mentioned, the film was originally meant to be edgy, but still, come on. Ozzy and Drix GBA. There was a GBA game made based off of the TV show at the time, and oh my god. It's bad. It's sort of mad, there's a lot of issues about it, but this is an iceberg video, not a game review, so yeah. August 10th, 2001. This was just when the release date of the film came out, but it's worth mentioning that the film was originally meant to come out around spring of 2001, but then it was delayed due to the PG-13 scenes. Live action Cells at Work. This was a joke name given by someone who made a Japanese dub of the film and published it on Nico Nico. Even though, funny enough, it was announced in 2023 Warner Bros. Of Japan was planning to make a live-action Cells at Work. Warner Bros., out of all the people, are they sure that they're not going to have that much deja vu, or did they eat too much clams? Also, speaking of that, Osmosis Jones and Cells at Work comparisons. Oh my god, I can't believe I'm doing this. Anyways, there's a few similarities to Osmosis Jones and a 2015 manga and anime Cells at Work. Those being the main characters are a white blood cell and a cold pill, but for Cells at Work, it's a red blood cell and a white blood cell. And also their partnership is kinda different, depending on which you're talking about. But unlike Osmosis Jones, Cells at Work is actually far more educational about the human body and shows many different variants of cell types, like platelets and killer T cells. While for Osmosis Jones, it just doesn't show that many cell types and just makes fun of how the human body works. But at the same time, there was sperm cells that were in the PG-13 version of the film. And also, speaking of that, Cells at Work also has its 18+ variant known as Code Black. Other than gender swaps and more blood and gore, they had viruses and germs based off of smoking and sexual diseases, and a few adult themes. But yet again, Ozzy and Drix did have the balls to add nicotine as a villain for a kids show. But as Italy once said, "I'm gonna have a baby." This is a line from an episode of Ozzy and Drix from one of the more weirder episodes, since it was about Ozzy somewhat being impregnated with a germ. as it starts to grow until they finally get rid of it. But there's like a bunch of other weird moments in the show. Don't even get me started on the episode of Ozzy acting like a girl. Ozzy and Drix on Google. Whenever you Google Ozzy and Drix on Google, not only get a few results of the show, but you get a few results of the ship. Yes, people ship these two for some reason. And sometimes it goes from being okay to being... all because it's typing Ozzy and Drix. It's kind of like looking for the original Skibbity Dumb Yes 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 meme, but all it shows results for that god-awful Skibbity Toilet meme. Out-of-body experience. This is a topic they talk about in the TV show, where if cells go out of the body, they start to freeze up. In those cases, we see this happen to Ozzy in the first episode of the show, and for cells to go out of the body, they need a special suit to do that. And if not, they will start to freeze up, which makes no sense, as in a movie, we see Ozzy and Drax fight outside of the body on Shane's eye. So basically, they made a new plot hole. And also, this is the name of a two-part episode where Ozzy ends up in the body of Christine, Hector's crush, and ends up turning into a woman. Drix is claustrophobic. In the final episode of the show, Drix ends up being crammed into a pill bottle, which he starts to freak out a little and show a few signs of claustrophobic. Claustrophobic is an intense fear that people have when enclosed in spaces. Even though for Drix it makes no sense as he came out of a pill in the movie, but for some reason he does show signs of this in the show. Ozzy and Drix uses movie clips. So basically in the show and almost the entirety of the show, they no joke reuse a bunch of footage from the movie, like a lot. Even in the intro. And a basic example is that in Season 2, Episode 7, where they reuse the entire scene of the dam breaking, and they just dub over the original audio. They also use a clip taken from the beginning of the movie where there's two policemen that drive off, in almost every episode. I didn't think this show was that strange or cheap, and I wasn't expecting Italian levels of footage. Hey Bill Murray. Hey Bill Murray, don't put that dirty egg in your mouth is a song made by YouTube channel Stupid Sanji. Did I get that wrong? And it's a funny parody song of the beginning of the movie. Osmosis Jones soundtrack. This is referring to the soundtrack both instrumental that played in a film and the songs they played in a film. The thing that makes this somewhat lost media and a mystery is that certain tracks or exclusive versions of songs haven't been released, like the Phil Sterling version of Hot Blooded, and the instrumental track hasn't been found or released either, and the theme song as well. Don't be mad. This was a song that wasn't played in the movie, but was in the music CD of the soundtrack. People theorize that it would have played in the film during or after a scene where Ozzy and Leah would argue about their relationships, as they would go separate ways, since in the 1998 script, Ozzy and Leah's relationship was meant to be a lot more complicated. Fleming is based on Nixon. Richard Nixon was somewhat the inspiration for the character, as well as a couple other political figures and people. And also, the actor who did the voice for Mayor Fleming did a Nixon impression in order to fit the character. Fleming is a cancer cell theory. This theory says the reason why Frank is somewhat dumb is because Fleming is a brain cancer cell. You want this chain so bad. This is a line in the movie, and the full line is, quote, "You know what, Jones? You want this chain so bad? Big Daddy Drax is gonna let you have it." You can already guess why this line is on the iceberg. I know it's not in the same vein as Why Don't I Get Someone Else to Watch a Sheep Tonight, but it's in the same vein as Earthworm Jim telling Peter Puppy to whip him. Graphic novel. There was also a graphic novel that was made, and it's basically the movie, and it just uses screen caps from the film. Isaac Hayes. Isaac Hayes is an American singer and songwriter and music composer, and is famous for making such themes like the one for the movie Shaft. In his script, there was meant to be a musical score made by him with the lyrics, quote, "Who's the cells with walls of steel," followed up by backup singer saying Osmosis Jones. Kinda like the Shaft theme, but I don't know if they ever did get him to actually do the theme for the 1998 version, but sadly he passed away in 2008. Conquer Worm, Earthworm Jim. How did Earthworm Jim end up on this iceberg? There's an episode of Ozzy and Drix called Conquer Worm, and in Earthworm Jim TV series, there's also an episode called Conquer Worm. And in Ozzy and Drix's episode, it focuses about them having to deal with two flatworms. And for the Earthworm Jim TV show, Earthworm Jim must fight an evil version of himself known as Evil Jim. So basically, two shows had one episode with the same name of it, and it having to do with an evil worm. Scrap toys. There was meant to be a line of toys made for the film. The most known ones are the capsule machine toys and a line of action figures of Ozzy, Drix, and Drix. These were cancelled due to the movie being a box office bomb, and apparently these wouldn't be made if they made $60 million, according to some sources, but prototypes do exist and they're expensively rare. Drix's goons are STDs. They're never really known as anything in the film, but if you play Osmosis Jones in the Rash Outbreak, they're known as scabies, which is a type of STD. Mark Hyman. Mark Hyman was the one of the original directors and the one who made the script for the movie. Hot-Blooded Philip Steer remix. This was a remixed version of the song Hot Blooded by the band Foreigner. Other than its lyrics, this is talking about how Phil Sterling made a version of this song to fit the movie's theme and style. Not gonna lie, it does sound amazing. The only problem is that it's completely lost and unreleased, and the only thing we have of it is of the scene where they played the song. Electric Avenue. In the European cut of the film, as well as the US VHS copies of the film, Hot Blooded has replaced the remix of the song Electric Avenue instead. Penicillin G. In the episode Strep Finger, there's a character named Penicillin G who's basically a parody of James Bond, and the whole episode is about him and Drix teaming up as Ozzy gets a little jelly about it. But still, not that bad. A Cold Day and Hector similarities. In the episode A Cold Day and Hector, it's about Hector going snowboarding in the mountains and getting lost, with Ozzy and Drix having to prevent him from dying of hypothermia until he's found. Julian Sands, who was Penicillin G's voice actor, got lost in the mountains in January 2023 and eventually died. Rest in peace. SeaWorld. SeaWorld was an area of the movie that was cut in early promo art. It was meant to be a theme park in the eye, and we would see the POV of Frank, and it appears on Osmosis Jones' Flash game that we talked about earlier, and also in a deleted scene of the film where Ozzy and Drix would went there before they got to the donut scene. This was sadly unfinished and cut from the film. Absence from Space Jam 2. Remember Space Jam New Legacy? You know, the movie that Aaron pretended that didn't exist and was a sort of Hollywood milking old films for sequels? What, that should be left alone. Anyways, the movie had a lot of Warner Bros. Characters that they either owned the rights to or made, despite the Iron Giant almost appearing in all of Warner Bros. Media. So we'll just ignore him. Ozzy and Drix are nowhere to be seen. I'm guessing Warner Bros. Didn't want to remember such a box office bomb, they decided not to add them to the film. But here's the thing. My theory is that they're both in the film, but if you get a microscope and put it on the TV screen, you could probably see the Jackass the movie. Osmosis Jones made an unintentional cameo in Jackass the movie. In the film, there's a clip where Brandon DeCamillo storms a convenience store on his bike while dressed up as a knight. He crashes into Bam Margera, and they both crash into some shelves. A woman looks over her shoulder, and in the commotion, 3 rental copies of Osmosis Jones are in plain sight behind her. Pikachu cameo. When Ozzy convinces Drix not to depart on the boat without the bladder, one of the people waiting in line is holding a Pikachu plush doll. One of the animators confirmed they snuck in a Pikachu because WB owned the distribution rights of Pokemon in the US back then. On digital platforms like HBO Max, the film is cropped to a 16.9 in order to keep Pikachu out of frame due to copyright. Sperm. Your Aryan sperm! You didn't think I was gonna get this PG-13, so yeah, you doubt the sperm cell that was cut from the movie? Well, you're wrong, because when they show Mayor Fleming, there's a sign that says our founder, and a statue is of a sperm. So conclusion, it's still in the movie. Ozzy's parents were abducted by a blood test. In earlier revisions of the film, there was originally meant to be more to Ozzy's character. One of the rejected ideas is that when he was little, he would have a reunion with his family until Frank got a blood test. This would have added to the lonely side of his character, and at the end of the film, in a really strange twist, his family would have came back when they would add blood to Frank. Drix expired in 1980. If you look at the sticker that was on Drix's arm, it said that he expires in 1980. Drix with legs concept art. In the original 1998 concept art of Drix, he would have actually had legs for some strange reason. I'm guessing this is when he was still known as Cypro, since they have a lot of similar details. But funnily enough, in the episode Dream Factory at the end, Drix ends up becoming a cheerleader in Hector's basketball dream. and as you can see, he's grown a pair of human legs. Chuck Reginald. In the first draft from 1998, Ozzy had a partner named Chuck Reginald, who was killed in battle. This explains why he's so reluctant to get along with Drix/Cypro. Will Smith considered for the role of Ozzy. In pre-production, they were considering and almost got none other than Will Smith to voice Osmosis Jones, but it never really happened due to him being busy with other projects and got Chris Rock to do it instead, which, fun fact, this was one of the roles he hated doing. Red blood cell/blood inconsistency. In the film, the one thing that many people will notice is that in the film, there's a lot more white blood cells than normal red blood cells. The thing is that red blood cells in total is around 20 to 30 trillion, and for white blood cells it's 4 to 11,000, which makes no sense since there's a lot more white blood cells than red blood cells as we can see in the film, and also in Ozzy and Drix, red blood cells are depicted as liquid, which is odd. Kids WB events. Ozzy and Drix were airing on Kids WB. The channel had promos and bumpers where them and other characters from the network would participate in events. These ads use recycled footage from each character's respective series, usually using multiple sources, causing Ozzy and Drix to switch from TV footage to movie footage mid-sequence, or cause Shaggy or Scooby-Doo to switch between What's New Scooby-Doo footage to Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island footage to Scooby-Doo Where Are You footage. Phil Lamar not reprising his role for a holiday sock party. Ozzy has one line in Holiday Sock Party, which is
Smell to it.
Yeah, it's very familiar.
but if you listen to it, you can clearly tell that it's not Phil Lamar voicing him. Buffalo Chicken Wing Festival. This was an event that Frank was planning to go to and most importantly, Fleming's planned. And strangely enough, after this film was released, chicken wing festivals became a thing, since before the film, they were not a thing. Metabolica. In Ozzy and Drix, there's a band in the show called Metabolica, and if you can't already tell, this is a parody of the band Metallica, Persian dub. This dub of the film was heavily censored and they cropped out almost every shot of Shane and Leah. The music was also trimmed, and they blurred the underwear, and also has a lot of jump cuts, so the film is missing over 30 minutes of footage.
آخرین بار اعلام میکنیم بادام زمینی برای سفر به
معده 5 و 35 دقیقه بعد از ظهر
اکنون مسافر می‌رسیم. توجه کنید تمام سلولهای چربی لطفاً به دروازه‌های پایینی متشکرم. یک کپسول سرماخوردگی با طعم میوه با کمی شیر از راه رسید. وای چقدر بزرگه.
1953. If you look at Ozzy's locker, you can see a calendar with a picture of Leah taped onto it. For some reason, the date on it is 1953. This is somewhat a reference to Playboy magazine. The first one was released in 1953 and had none other than Marilyn Monroe. Russian voice actor for Drax voiced Earthworm Jim. In the Russian version of Osmosis Jones, Drax is voiced by Leonid Belzorovich, who also voiced Earthworm Jim for the Russian dub of the show. How does Earthworm Jim keep finding his way onto this iceberg?
Я устрою вам пожар.
Я пришел спасти принцессу. Если у нее не окажется маленьких крылышек и забавного имени, можно считать, что мне страшно не повезло.
Ozzy and Drix fourth wall breaks. Just like Earthworm Jim, there's a few episodes of Ozzy and Drix that has a few fourth wall breaks. For example, in the episode Antihistamine, Ozzy sees a hallucination of a girl and ends up hugging them, which really turns out to be an old Scottish man, and he looks at the camera and groans, "This is a better hallucination." Or in Triumph of Supplements, Ozzy is watching a brutal fist fight and says, "You can't show that on TV." And there's a few other examples. Ozzy's grandpa fought the measles. When they're getting their stuff, Ozzy picks up a picture of his grandpa who fought in the measles. This is kind of a nice detail for Ozzy's character. And also they mention the war in the Flash game. Filming location plaque. They filmed the entirety of the movie in Massachusetts, and the locations that they filmed the movie at actually have a plaque for the film being a historic site to visit. But at the same time, the film was also a box office bomb. CPR, use damn CPR. This was a quote that Dr. Mike said on his Osmosis Jones video while reenacting to the hospital scene of the film. Maggie. This is the name of Shane's dead mom. Many people won't notice this detail unless they pay close attention to the film. Let's go catch a cold. Other than that being a quote that Drix says, this was the name of a graphic novel and used for ads, as well as using the whole catch the fever quote. The Red Death. El Muri Rojo, which is said by the stereotypical Spanish-speaking germ fugitive, translates to the Red Death. And no, it is not a taco sauce for all my viewers. Instead, it's a reference to a unique poem made by none other than Edgar Allan Poe. In summary, the poem is about a mysterious yet deadly plague that kills people in a few hours, which now looking at it is still a cool reference and foreshadowing to the main villain of the film, since Drax could be somewhat described like that. Bacteria Wars. Believe it or not, when this film was shown in Japan, they actually called the film Bacteria Wars, even though the soundtrack album in Japan is still known as Osmosis Jones. And the worst case scenario of this is that the film is not even about a war of bacterias, it's just about them stopping one virus. And the name Bacteria Wars sounds like a name for a movie or an episode of Cells at Work, or a prequel story about Ozzy's grandfather. Why does that sound like something Hollywood might do? Razzle. This is the name of a YouTube channel that has a hobby of just getting drunk and reenacting the movies. And one of these films they reenacted to was Osmosis Jones. Tour of Frank. This is the name of a behind-the-scenes video that was made for the movie and had Brandy Norwood as the host. The thing that's worth mentioning about this film is the green screen entity. It's sort of bad, but yet again this is 2001, but at the same time, Space Jam used a lot of green screen editing. And it's just crazy to see how a film that came out before Osmosis Jones had better green screening effects than this. Ozzy grew up in the butt. In the movie, during the scene where Ozzy and Drix are talking about college, Ozzy wasn't able to afford it, according to him, and he states how his skull was to crack before saying it was in the crack. Crack has multiple slangs or meanings behind it. In body meaning, it means the butt. Drix graduated from Chicago. In the same scene, Drix ends up saying that he was developed and graduated at the University of Chicago. Doug. This is the name of the firefighter cell that Ozzy is somewhat friends with, and at the same time, this is what the entire entry is just referring to. Extended nose sequence. During the nose sequence, there's meant to be a lot more longer version of it, that where Ozzy and Drix would have got stuck inside of a booger hanging out of Frank's nose, and it would have used a mix of animation and live action. Ozzy and Drix would have to try to escape before they end up on Frank's finger. This was unfinished and cut from the movie for some unknown reason, but could still be seen in promo images. My guess for the reason why it was scrapped because it was a little too much for the film, since they already had to cut several scenes of the film and tone it down to a PG rating, and also at the same time, the pimple popping scene was already enough for me to handle on the first watch. Kidney Rock. Kidney Rock is the name of a band that's performing at the Zit, and at the same time, it could be kind of referencing the dialogue where they say that someone's gonna go visit the stones in the kidney, as in, you know, kidney stones. And for the last entry, we have Ozzy and Leah. This is another ship in the community. In this case, it's of Ozzy and Leah, which they do get together at the end of the film, but in 1988 script, they were already a thing, but their relationship was just really complicated. And, you know, there's your usual stuff, fan art, and it kind of ranges depending on which and what.